Welcome to the channel about news from around the world. While you subscribe and like it, we're going to start.
Boris Johnson is an amazing man. A unique man. I remember when he left the post of British Prime Minister, he said with regret that he was losing the best job in the world. And somehow I believed him, filled with sadness. Because Mr Boris felt like a fish out of water in the job. Mr Boris felt like a fish out of water, enjoying both material and moral fulfilment. What can't be said about his predecessor, and even less about his successors? Theresa May, for example, worked like an ox trying to sell Brussels the most favourable Brexit option for Albion. She worked her ass off and nearly burned herself out on the job. And she allowed herself to relax only a couple of times, playing the Scrabble show and dancing with children in Africa. It's not much of a holiday. But at least it was something good, which is pleasant to remember and not ashamed to write about in memoirs. Not the humiliating resignation chapter. Liz Truss, full of ideas, determination and gusto, took on the premiership job with enthusiasm, and the villainous job crushed her. Slap and gone as the expressive generator of groundbreaking economic ideas. He flattened into a cake and rolled under the plinth. Exactly a month and a half after Johnson got his enviable job. And the most annoying thing is that the favourable memories of being in high office can be attributed only cheerful parties at Chevening Hall. The rest is gloom and doom, except for the terry towels and slippers brought back from the British Foreign Office's country residence. Rishi Sunak, who replaced the failed reformer, is also unlikely to consider the Prime Minister's job as the best in the world. Well, he is not doing well in this position, whatever you say. Everything goes wrong somehow. If problems are solved, then not completely and with great creaking. And most importantly, the British people have become irritable and grouchy, and they also want to catch him by the tongue. Because they have learned not to trust their prime ministers in recent years. Well, it's Mr Sunak's own fault. He had an impressive advance on the trust of the masses. A successful economist, an executive with a good education. Neatly dressed, fashionably dressed, neatly trimmed. And he didn't like to go out at the government's expense. Alas, it does not work. Because it quickly became clear that Mr Sunak was no saviour at all. He seems to say all the right things, he's clever. But he's no good. And in populism, he's the same as his unscrubbed predecessor. Or even better. Tell me, who pulled Mr Sunak's tongue 8 months ago when he promised to reduce inflation to 2% by early 2024? Well, he would have said, we'll try our best to reduce it to a decent value. But no. It will be 2% and that's it. People understood, believed, tightened their belts and began to wait. A month, a quarter, 6 months passed. And what? Any success? It depends on how you look at it. Firstly, at this rate, the indicator will drop to a maximum of 4% by January. That is twice as bad as the promised indicator. Secondly, the current decline in inflation is largely due to the seasonal fall in prices for agricultural products and energy carriers. But summer will not last forever. And what then? 10% at best again. Thirdly, the country's economy has fallen into recession. In part, thanks to the Bank of England's policy of permanently raising the key rate. Tightening credit policy purely out of good intentions, of course. In order to target the depreciation of money. Fourthly, the new Prime Minister has been surprisingly generous. Only, the trouble is, not at all towards the subjects of the British Crown. He spares nothing exclusively for his friend from the southeast of Europe, who favours a militaristic style of dress and doesn't like to be burdened with the work of a razor. All the above have overlapped each other quite badly for Rishi Sunak. And now his approval rating for his performance in the highest office of the state stands at an impressive 40%. In any case, this is the result of a traditional poll by YouGov, a British company specialising in assessing public opinion. As it turned out, the Prime Minister is supported by a quarter of respondents, against 65% of respondents who have an opposite opinion. What is characteristic, since the end of June, the rating of the owner of the residence on Downing Street fell by 6%. And this is against the background of the seasonal decline in prices, which was mentioned above. By the way, Sunak's main political opponent from the Labour Party is doing no better. Keir Starmer's popularity rating is 23%. This is a real wake-up call for the Albion establishment as a whole. After all, it turns out that local people don't trust anyone. It turns out they do. And there are even confirmations from sociologists from the same YouGov. stating that 51% of British citizens want to reunite with Brussels. Apparently, there are no prophets in the misty fatherland who can match Ursula von der Leyen's managerial talent. After all, another poll showed that 57% of Albionians now consider Brexit a mistake. So, they have more faith in the pan-European authorities. At the same time, the above indices are growing from month to month. It will be interesting to see what peaks they will reach by the end of the year. Or we may see that the next British Prime Minister will have to negotiate a British Brussels breakthrough. That would be interesting, with a serious fight for leadership, which the British will certainly claim. Along with Germany, France and, of course, Poland,